I'm going to talk about two families of magnetic macro and nanowires. But first of all, as was indicated in the introduction, this year I am IEEE Magnetic Society Distinguished Lecturer, and it's my duty to present this summary of the activities of the society, kind of publicity for you to become members if you are not yet. So I would like to say that this IEEE Magnetic Society is the largest non-profit global association on everything related with magnetism, academy, industry, teaching, etc. And the activities of the society are governed by the administrative committee, which is formed by 4 officers, 24 elected members, elected by all members of the society, plus 11 chairs of different committees related to the different activities of the society. So organizing conferences, Intermag, MMM, technical activities, publications, education, and this is particularly important for PhD students. So I would like to say that there is a summer school every year in one big continent. So this year was in Italy, next year will be in Taiwan, next year will be in the continent of America. So and this summer school, so the PhD students attending the summer school, all the expenses are covered by the society. So it's very interesting if you apply for next year. Also, distinguished lecturer, I understand that this program is somehow an extension of the education activities. There is also another chair, membership, chapters. And chapters, I think, there is not yet a Greek chapter. I think you are a large amount of scientists working in magnetism in different cities in Greece. And I suggest you to set up a chapter in Greece. So it has some advantages for all members being members of the chapter. And there is another activities. And in summary, I would like to say, if you are not yet members of the society, please, you can tell me or you can contact this person here, or you can go to the webpage of the Magnetic Society and to become a member. By the way, how many members of the society do we have here? So Vangelis, 2, we are 3, 4, okay. 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 This is a summary of my talk. I will be talking about these two families of micro and nanowires, paying attention first to the fabrication, then to the magnetic characterization, and then looking for different kinds of applications, making use of these materials as sensing elements and, well, other applications. To summarize, the leitmotif of this talk is to emphasize the role of the cylindrical geometry of the wires and of the magnetic anisotropy to determine which are the domain structures, depending on the shape and the anisotropy, and the magnetization process, looking for these applications, as I mentioned, applications as magnetic sensors and beyond. Well, this is a picture of the laboratory in Madrid where we prepare the magnetic microwires. These magnetic microwires are amorphous in the microstructure, and they have different diameters. We can control the diameter between 100 and 180 micrometers in diameter through the so-called in-water quench technique. But also we can prepare microwires with diameter between 1 and 30 microns, roughly, covered by Pyrex coating. Okay, and we can also prepare ribbons, but I will not be talking about today. These are two images of the machines to prepare the microwires by ultrarapid solidification. In summary, these fabrications, we have to heat a polycrystalline master alloy up to 1,200 degrees centigrade, roughly, and quench the material down to room temperature in around 1 millisecond. So the velocity of quenching is around 1 million degrees centigrade per second. So I will show today the video to the right. This is the so-called in water quench technique. So there is a cylinder. It is rotating very fast, 6,000 revolutions per minute, something like that. We have water in the inner part, and this is rotating. So, well, I will explain better during the video. Okay. So the cylinder is rotating. There is some water inside. There is a quartz tube. It is an induction coil, which is hitting the polycrystalline metallic alloy. And you see this open by the upper part, and there is a tiny hole here, and with an overpressure of argon. So you saw, we have the microwire. This microwire is typically around 100 microns in diameter. So by the other machine, we can prepare microwires in diameter roughly 10 microns. But well, if you are interested, by the end, I can repeat the other video. But it is important in both cases for the magnetic properties of these microwires, the alloy composition. So those composition with high magnetostriction are rich in iron, and they have the magnetic bistability, I will show you later. And those with varies in magnetostriction are cobalt-rich, cobalt-iron-based alloys. Okay, so the summary of a bistable behavior of the magnetostrictive alloy microwires, they are characterized by the so-called bistable behavior. This is the typical hysteresis loop with a single and giant Barkhausen jump. So it is nearly impossible to get an experimental point in this Barkhausen jump. So we have two stable states, magnetic stable state, and this hysteresis loop is interpreted considering that we have a large axial domain with magnetization axially oriented. And if you go down to the schematic view of the hysteresis loop, in a positive remanence, we have a nearly single domain, but at the very end of the microwire, where we have some cluster domain structure, some local distribution of magnetic charges. When we reach the coercivity, the switching field, domain wall depends from one end, in this case, the end to the right, and moves very fast to the left. And then we find the negative stable state with a single domain with magnetization pointing in the opposite direction. Okay, we have essentially two large domains and a domain wall, single domain wall, just one domain wall that moves very fast along the wire. From the experimental point of view, it's apparently very easy to characterize these microwires. For example, this can be done in the laboratory with a setup prepared at home. So you have here a solenoid to the left, in the upper part, you have a solenoid generating the axial magnetic field. Inside the solenoid, you have a number of pickup coils, secondary coils, picking up the signal from the microwire, which is inside a tiny capillary inside the secondary coils. So here you have also a schematic view down the picture. And then to determine which is the velocity of this propagating domain wall that I mentioned before, so we know which is the distance, the order of 8 millimeters, 1 centimeter between two pickup coils. And we have the time, distance in time between the pickup signals recorded by the pickup coil. So this case is around 1 millisecond. So we have 1 centimeter in moves in 1 millisecond, so you get the velocity. The order of magnitude, for example, you see in the figure to the upper part to the right, the velocity of the domain wall is a function of the applied field, but after some transient behavior for small applied field, we have a linear behavior. So the velocity is linearly proportional to the applied field. The domain wall motion was characterized through the general motion equation, and we determined the different damping mechanisms for the motion of this domain wall, which are the mechanisms that try to impair the motion of the wall. So there are eddy current, spin relaxation, and structural relaxation. But well, today I will not pay so much attention to that. But let me explain a couple of example experimental cases that are very relatively easy, as I mentioned. So there are some tricks anyway. So here we have the solenoid. We have 2 pickup coils in green that are symmetrically placed near the ends of the solenoid. And we have, in addition, a local field coil. They are connected in series. So the local field generated by this local field coil is opposing the driving field generated by the solenoid. Okay, down we have a schematic view of the domain structure with 2 domains and the domain wall propagating along the microwire. And this is the case of a head-to-head domain wall, because magnetization is pointing toward the domain wall, this head-to-head. Well, then playing with the values of the field generated by the solenoid and that of the local field coil, it is possible to control the velocity of this propagating domain wall. So you see here is the velocity of the domain wall in the picture, the upper part to the left, the velocity as a function of the amplitude of the local field for a particular value of the driving field, in this case, 170 amperes per meter. As we increase the local field, the velocity of the domain wall decreases continuously until dropping and being stopped, completely stopped this domain wall. So it is starting moving at roughly 700 meters per second, and we can control the velocity, and also we can stop the position of this domain wall in any place we want, depending on the values of the local field. And it is very important because the position is completely metastable. The domain wall wants to go to one end or to the other to reduce the total magnetic energy. But this is important for some applications. The second experiment I wanted to show you, which is in principle, again, very simple, is we have here another domain, another microwire with this case, we do not have any local field, no coil in the middle. As you see, the domain wall velocity as a function of the driving field is also linear. After the transient behavior, we have a linear behavior, but it happens that when we apply the field in the positive direction, let's say to the right, we have some value of the velocity. While when we apply the field in the other direction, the velocity is smaller. So I have to remember that I forgot to mention in this case, I forgot to say that it is very important. The microwire, it is inserted in the capillary. One end is completely inside the solenoid, and the other end is outside. So we are ensuring that this wall I mentioned before is nucleated in this end to the left of the microwire. And then the domain wall moves to the left, from the left to the right, always. Okay? So in both cases, going back to the rightwards and leftwards applied fields, we see that the velocities are different. But in both cases, the domain wall is moving from the left to the right. Okay? Which is the origin for this asymmetry in the velocity regarding the direction of the applied field. Well, in order to explain this, we consider a simplified model. You see here in the upper part, we have a schematic view of the domain wall separating two domains. The applied field is driving field is applied to the right. The velocity in this case is also to the right. And we have the shape of this domain wall, we took it as a parabolic, trying to follow the symmetry of the cylindrical microwire. Then, however, we know that the length of this domain wall is this figure is not to the scale. We know from other experiments that the length of the domain wall is much larger than the diameter of the microwire. Then, in order to study the dynamics of the motion of this domain wall, we are using the general expression for the Landau-Lipschitz-Gilbert equation, which has this expression here. This expression where we have to take into account all the components of the magnetic moments inside the domain wall, schematically seen here, the figure down. So we have to consider the azimuthal, the circumferential, the radial, and the axial components of the magnetic moments inside the wall. Well, considering all these equations, finally, we conclude the following, that it depends on whether we have a head-to-head or tail-to-tail domain wall. Going back, in this case, again, we have a head-to-head domain wall because the magnetization is pointing towards the direction of the position of the wall. In case we had a magnetization in both domains having the opposite direction, we would have a tail-to-tail domain wall. Well, it happens that these calculations show that the velocity of the domain wall depends on whether we have head-to-head or tail-to-tail characteristics for this domain wall. So we can explain this asymmetry in the propagation of the domain wall, considering that we have a tail-to-tail or head-to-head domain wall. Okay, let's go now to some, after this part, to some, before the applications, let me show you the general behavior of the non-magnetostrictive amorphous wires. So this, I mentioned again, there's a cobalt iron base microwires with large content in cobalt. So these are probably the softest magnetic materials, softest because they magnetize and demagnetize very easily. So the coercivity is in the order of milliestes. So it's really very, very small coercivity. And instead of a single domain, as in the case of the iron base wire, we have here a multi-domain structure with that produces a very large magnetic susceptibility. These microwires have nearly zero magnetostriction. And I would like to show you some unpublished results measuring the direct measurement of the magnetostriction in these microwires. So for example, for cobalt 94 iron 6, I hope you can see these figures now here. So I am plotting the fractional change in length as a function of the applied field. So that is magnetostriction as a function of the applied field. So you see it's very sensitive because we can, the saturation value for the magnetostriction here is 4 times 10 to the minus 8. This is really very, very small value that we can quantify experimentally. Important is that we can measure this value. But also, I would like to underline that if we change just 1% in the composition, for example, cobalt from 94 to 95 and iron from 6 to 5, at the beginning we had a positive magnetostriction and now we have negative magnetostriction, also very small. But so we can tune very finely the magnetostriction of the material of the microwire just by changing a little bit the composition. Well, and these non-magnetostrictive wires have the characteristic of exhibiting the so-called giant magneto-impedance effect. This giant magneto-impedance effect by which the real and imaginary components of the impedance change drastically when we put our microwire in the presence of a static magnetic field. And the origin is the classical skin effect. Just to remember what is this skin effect. If we have you see schematically in this figure in the upper part, if we make a current in the frequency of kilohertz, for example, through a microwire, so the current flows through the entire wire. But when we increase the frequency, for example, in the range of megahertz, the current is restricted only to the surface of the microwire. So this is classical skin effect. And the penetration is delta, is the penetration depth. So the impedance can be expressed by this expression, the impedance to the left. Then where K is a function of the delta, which is the penetration depth. So finally, delta, which is a function of the applied field, has this expression, the square root of the resistivity over the P pi, the circular permeability, which is a function of the applied field, and the frequency of a current. So when we place the wire in a position where we have a static field, the permeability changes, so decreases, and the delta increases. So finally, the impedance decreases, which is what it is observed experimentally. So for this, to observe this giant magneto-impedance in non-magnetostrictive wire, we need very high permeability, which has to be sensitive to static fields or also to mechanical stresses. We have to work in high enough frequency, and the material has to be high in conductivity. These are the requirements to observe giant magneto-impedance. Now let's go to some applications. This one, so some years ago, was a patent on a magnetoelastic signature or authentication. And this we developed. So we have a pen. In the axis, we have a magnetic microwire, which is in touch with a spring. And the upper part, in the bottom, we have some small cables to control the magnetic state of the microwire. So when we are writing, when we are signing, we are making some mechanical stress to the microwire. So we have the magnetic properties of the microwire change with the mechanical stress. And a typical magnetoelastic signature is something like you see here in the upper part to the right. Voltage as a function of time. So the signature is characterized by a number of peaks, which change positive, negative in time. So when you are making more or larger or smaller mechanical stress when signing. So I would like to underline that even your personal magnetoelastic signature is not always the same, because imagine you are very happy or you are not so happy. The intensity of writing, signing is not the same. So what characterizes your magnetoelastic signature is not the intensity of the peaks or even the total time during the signature, but it is the trend, and the trend of these peaks, positive, negative, negative, positive, and so on. And also the time can be different. So you can say very fast or slower, but it is important, the trend, as I mentioned, of these peaks. Okay, another application, well, we developed that in a European project, a multi-layer microwire, big magnetic wire. So we started with the so-called glass-coated microwires I mentioned at the beginning. So we spattered a tiny gold nanolayer in the external part, and then we use this gold nanolayer as for the electrodeposition of an external layer which is magnetic. So next, you see a picture, a photo of the big magnetic microwire. We have the internal core, which is ferromagnetic and soft, typically intermediate layer, which is Pyrex, insulating Pyrex, and then the external layer. So we can select the soft and hard magnetic character of each phase, the internal and external set. And for example, you see here the hysteresis loop is homogeneous, but as I will mention here, it has a particular curvature. Because of the fabrication process, spontaneously the microwire has some kind of bending. So it's not right, straight, but has some curvature. So this can be related to this asymmetry also. But I can tell you that we have this explanation, but there's still more work. So I wanted to show this because it's a recent work last year, but we are not completely finished with the problem. Okay, so I think we can continue. Yeah, thank you. So you see this hysteresis loop for a microwire having a soft and hard phases. So we have used this type of bi-magnetic microwires for several applications. For example, to measure the temperature using the so-called small angle magnetization rotation technique. So here's the inductance as a function of temperature. So it was in a project where we had to measure the temperature around the body's temperature around 35, 40 degrees. You see the slope of the inductance with the temperature is large enough. In a single phase microwire, we have almost no effect. Or also more recently, we developed a micro actuator. So I mentioned these microwires have a spontaneous curvature. So when you apply the magnetic field in one direction, so close to the main direction of the microwire, so the ends of the microwire try to follow the direction of the wire. So it's a micro actuator. And it is related with a different magnetic character of the soft, of the external layer and the internal part. Very recently, people in Dresden have used our microwires, magnetostrictive microwires, for these very miniaturized magnetic multipoles. Yes, the idea is to get a high local variation of magnetic field just in the center of these 4 microwires. So the microwires have a tiny coils at the end, so ensuring that each microwire is magnetically saturated. We have a magnetic dipole. So depending on whether they are connected, these tiny coils, we can have a quadrupole field or biaxial magnets in the center of position. And it is very important to control the inhomogeneity of the magnetic field very locally. Other applications making use of this technique of rapid solidification, for example, we have been collaborated with different technological universities and companies, for example, to develop sensing elements in flux-gates. For example, here I mentioned before, it was very interesting to measure very small values of the magnetostriction. You see the noise of this flux-gate is minimum when we have 0 magnetostriction, or the minimum value of magnetostriction. Also, we have used this technique to prepare with some visiting scientists from different countries, air-free hard microwires out of manganese bismuth. So here the cohesivity as a function of temperature, the absolute value of cohesivity is not so large, but very, very important, it increases with temperature. For some applications can be all right in high temperature applications. Or also, here to the right, we have a nickel manganese gallium glass coated microwire having some safe memory properties and super elastic behavior. And the last application I wanted to mention, it was last year with a Fulbright in Northeastern University in Boston. They were interested in checking which is the influence of a static magnetic field in the regeneration of neurons. So they knew that applying a local static field generated by 2 neodymium boron magnets, the neurons grew faster than without the magnetic field. Well, then I came with my microwires just to see what happens if we put these microwires in contact with the neurons. because this microwire generates a very local magnetic field at the ends of the microwire. So, and we have, they confirmed, the bioengineers there have confirmed that the presence of these microwires enhanced even more than a simple neodymium iron ore magnet. So here's still an open question, which is the origin for this influence of the magnetic field in the growth of the neurons. So it's not clear. Some motion of ions or something, but it is quantitatively, it is not yet understood. But I wanted to show you because it's just, we presented this in the GEMS conference that was held in Madrid in August. Okay, let me go to the second part of the talk on nanowires. Well, as you know, practically all the applications in nanotechnology are based in two-dimension nanostructures, thin films, multi-layers, but always in 2 dimensions. So there is an increasing interest to which is the effect of the curvature of magnetic nanostructures in the magnetic properties of these nanostructures. So the idea is to move from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions nanomagnets, nanostructures. For example, which is the influence of having this nanohelix, as you see here, or a nanomembrane that is how to say, rolled up, or nanotubes or nanowires. We are studying these cylindrical nanowires, and I'm going to summarize some of our outcomes in the last years. Okay, so in the case of nanowires, so there was some previous theoretical studies about the influence of the curvature in the magnetic properties. For example, there's some theoretical studies about the domain wall velocity as a function of a pulse, the velocity, depending whether we have one chirality in the domain wall or the opposite. So you see the magnetic moments inside the domain wall are having one chirality or the opposite. So it was demonstrated theoretically that the velocity is different. So although it is not the same, it reminds one to this observed asymmetry in the microwires. Also, in the cylindrical geometry favors the presence of vortexes. A vortex, as you know, so we have is a kind of dot where magnetic moments are aligned in this circumferential direction, but at the very axis. So because of exchange energy limitations, the magnetic moments can be only perpendicular. So in the axis, we have axial magnetic moments. And skyrmions, they are also very fashionable recently. So in fact, a skyrmion is also a dot. So we have the vortex, we have the skyrmions, but in the case of cylindrical nanowires, these skyrmions are being studied by a number of groups nowadays, where they appear in thin films, and they can be moved by magnetic fields or electrical currents. In the case of the cylindrical nanowires, we have what we call a skyrmion tube. So this skyrmion extends along the length of the nanowire. Also, I would like to mention that in the case of the cylindrical nanowires, we have a mathematical singularity, like in the vortex. So in the axis of the nanowire, we have so-called block point domain wall. It is a punctual region, very metastable, that wants to move very fast. Well, in our case, we have been working for years in these families of cylindrical nanowires. They are prepared by electrochemical techniques. So we prepare first a template where by anodization. So we prepare these well-arranged holes. And once we have these holes, we fill by electrodeposition with metallic magnetic elements, something like we have here. And this technique, we have used this technique because it's less expensive. It's not expensive at all. and we get very reproducible results and systematic results. And we can control, we can control the diameter of the nanowires, diameter roughly between 20 and 300 nanometers, 400 nanometers, and the length can be controlled from 100 nanometers to 50 microns. So the aspect ratio length to diameter can be very, very large. Okay, so this is a schematic view of the process to fabricate these nanowires. We start with this is a commercial plate of very high purity aluminum, and by two anodization processes, we have finally the membrane, this plate, open by both sides, having this alumina membrane, okay? Then we spattered a gold layer, and then this gold layer serves as an electrode for the electrode deposition. We fill with green wires, as you see here in the schematic view, the membrane. To the right, we have an image of these standing nanowires in the membrane. But then in the very last years, 6 to 7 years, roughly before the COVID started, we are studying individual nanowires, so which is more difficult. So in Madrid, we can prepare different families of nanowires, those having homogeneous diameter and homogeneous composition, and those having modulations in the longitudinal direction. For example, you see this upper figure, the multi-segmented multilayer. You see the different contrasts indicate us that we are dealing with different materials. In this case, cobalt gold, multi-segmented nanowire. But this modulation can be in the radial direction. We can get nanotubes or core cell nanowires, but also we can prepare diameter modulated nanowires, as you see here in this image. So you see alternating segments with different diameter and different length. Also, we can prepare radial nanowires when we start with a cylinder instead of a plate. Well, this technique can be useful to prepare another families of materials for different applications. We have done in collaboration with several groups. For example, magnetopolymers. You see in this image, in the upper part to the left, nickel nanowires inside polystyrene nanotubes. To the right, we have large-scale nanopattern figures by soft lithographic imprint and electrodeposition. Also, in collaboration with other professors in the Autonomous University of Madrid, we can prepare highly ordered plasmonic gallium nanoparticles in the upper part of the membrane, or for environmental applications and biomedicals, core cell iron magnetite nanowires. Okay? So it's very important to have collaboration with different groups to have some complementary research. So, and this is another application. This we prepare in a European project. The idea was to prepare arrays of magnetic nanowires as rare free magnets. So, in order to avoid the presence of rare earth, because of some inconveniences with the obtention of rare earth. So we selected cobalt iron nanowires, profiting of the high saturation magnetization and high working temperature, where we can tailor the magnetic anisotropy. The problem between having such an array of magnetic nanowires is that they are interacting magnetically, they are interacting magnetostatically, not exchange coupling, but magnetostatic interaction. Well, we developed some material was relatively all right, but we cannot compete with neodymium iron boron. Okay, only thing is that we can work at higher temperature. Another application we did in collaboration with other group was the preparation of magnetic resonance imaging contrast agents, preparing these multi-segmented nickel gold nanowires and then eliminating the gold. So we have a kind of nanoparticles that have a preferential direction. They are not spherical. It appears as our collaborators concluded that these materials are very good, very positive for as magnetic resonance imaging contrast agents for this type of application. Although we don't work on that, but I would like to mention, because it's important maybe for some of you, that these nanowires have been used to kill cancer cells by friction. Has been performed by a group in KAUST in Saudi Arabia, or interconnected nanowires in applications related to spin caloritronics and thermomagnetics, or as high frequency identification, making use of ferromagnetic resonance measurements in these arrays of nanowires. This we didn't work on that, but I would like for your information to mention. But in general, I would like to say that these three-dimensional architectures are very promising are very well suited for three-dimensional data storage and logic devices. And an important point is that we need a high level of control over the position and velocity of domain walls moving inside the nanowires. To prepare these three-dimensional architectures, typically is needed not only electrochemical preparation, but also lithographic techniques. Okay, well, I have here another video. You see here in the image to the right, you see thank you. You see a number of black and white points. Each one corresponds to an individual nanowire. So white indicating the magnetization pointing up, and black magnetization is pointing down. So when we apply the magnetic field, in the beginning we were in the remnant, and we applied a magnetic field perpendicular or parallel to the wire, sorry. So some white points became black. So we can see directly the reversal of individual nanowires inside the membrane. And we can compare the hysteresis loop obtained through this magnetic force microscopy image to the hysteresis loop in a squid magnetometer. Okay, so now on, I'm going to talk just on individual nanowires. So we take the nanowire from the membrane and we can measure individual nanowires, which is much more difficult. So, but in principle, I would like to underline that depending on the composition, we can have much different magnetocrystalline anisotropy. For example, those nanowires having a small amount of cobalt, they are typically have a cubic symmetry, cubic local order symmetry. While those having a large content of cobalt or even pure cobalt, they show hexagonal symmetry. And importantly, the anisotropy, magnetocrystalline anisotropy of hexagonal crystals is much larger than in the case of cubic crystals. Okay. And let me show the images. So starting with a series of cobalt nickel nanowires. First, with nanowires having large content in nickel, they are cubic. So they have cubic crystalline anisotropy, which is small, as I mentioned. So the shape anisotropy overcomes the magnetocrystalline anisotropy. And this is in A, you see, is a magnetic force microscopy at remanence with no applied field of a single individual nanowire. You see white and black points in the ends of the nanowire. So we are dealing with a ideal magnetic dipole. So down you see the macromagnetic simulations, and at the bottom you see this noisy hysteresis loop correspond to the hysteresis loop obtained experimentally through magnetoptic Kerr effect. Reminds us one to this bistable behavior in the microwires with a giant Barkhausen jump. Okay, thank you. So, but when we change the composition and we increase the content of cobalt, for example, cobalt 65, nickel 35, we obtain very, very interesting domain structure. For that, we have used the synchrotron radiation, using particularly the photoemission electron microscopy with X-ray circular dichroism. So you see in the schematic view, the upper part, the cylinder, we have the incident rays, X-rays. Part of them are reflected, and they give us information of the magnetic distribution in the surface of the nanowire. But part of the incident rays are transmitted. So we get information of the internal magnetic moments of the nanowire. So we get information not only of the surface, but also the distribution of magnetic moments, the orientation of magnetic moments inside the nanowire. Then we have here, for example, in this case, for cobalt 65, nickel 35, interesting domain structure. Here we have a multi-domain structure with domains transversely oriented. Here. Well, here we have a completely different contrast. This is interpreted, consider that we are dealing with two magnetic vortices. So here the magnetic moments are oriented circumferentially, and the chirality of these vortices is the opposite, one compared to the other. I'm going to talk, how long do I have yet? 5 more minutes, okay, thank you. So the behavior of modulated in diameter nanowires, I will be talking about this figure to the left. I like very much this image. So you see in the upper part to the left, we see a segment with small diameter, and this color for the lines are indicating as the lines of the stray magnetic field. So we are observing the lines of field outside the nanowire. This is obtained by electron holography imaging. So, and it is very clear that due to this transition of diameters, we have magnetic charges in this transition, positive, and in the other transition, negative. So we have these lines of magnetic lines outside the nanowire. So I skip this. We did some micromagnetic simulations. Also, I'd like to show you in the case of compositional modulated nanowires, for example, ferromagnetic 1 and 2, looking for cubic and hexagonal alternating crystalline anisotropies. In this case, in this image, in the upper part, you see the topological. You see it is a cobalt-nickel multi-segmented nanowires. The cobalt-nickel segments are very well separated from the nickel segments. And in the bottom, we see the magnetic images, also with the help of synchrotron. We have the cobalt-nickel segments with magnetic vortices, while the nickel is perfectly axial oriented, the magnetization. So we can control the magnetization in each segment just by controlling the composition. If I skip this one, I go to the last experiment. So in this case, we have iron, cobalt, copper. So ferromagnetic and metal multi-layer segment. So the copper is always 25 nanometers in width, but the length of the segments, magnetic segments, iron, cobalt, increase as we move from one end to the other. So roughly, we start with in one end is the length of these segments are 200 nanometers, and in the other end, 600 nanometers. So we are increasing the length of the individual segments. And this is the magnetic force image near the end of one of these nanowires. And then we study, again, by synchrotron radiation. And you see, I would like to underline. So in the upper part, on the magnetic field of minus 700 Hz, the contrast is practically white everywhere. You see the helical lines correspond to the copper. So it is magnetically saturated in one direction, black direction. As we remove the field and we apply increasing positive magnetic fields, you see that there is a black contrast, increasingly larger contrast, starting from the end. The end to the left correspond to the segments having smaller length. But then if we start with the opposite saturation, a black saturation under a positive field, then we remove the field, and then we apply the negative field of increasing amplitude, we observe something similar. We observe a white contrast increasing in length, in steps. But again, starting from the segments with having a small length. So we have unidirectional magnetization reversal process independently on which is the direction of the applied field. This is what we have called magnetization ratchet. It's unidirectional propagation independently on the field direction. So this has been interpreted, considered micromagnetic simulations. Well, this is the wheel rotating only in one direction. It's a classical mechanical ratchet. In our case, you see in this schematic view, the micromagnetic simulation, the color is brown or blue. The change of color starts in the end, close to the smaller segments, and then propagated. Just to summarize, I would like to say that the origin for this effect is related to the larger the magnetizing field of the small segments. The small segments, so we need a smaller magnetic field to reverse magnetization. Okay? So once one small segment is reversed, the magnetization reverses, it propagates via the magnetostatic interactions, not exchange, but magnetostatic interaction. So we have this ratchet effect or unidirectional effect. Well, I think I can stop here, and if you want to ask me, I skip some other. If you are interested later, you can ask me the effect of making a current flow through the wire. But I would like to mention this is a picture of the people in the group just before the COVID, and I would like, they have been working very strongly in the last years, particularly on nanowires, these nanowires. So Cristina Brand has been responsible for the preparation of these modulated nanowires. Agustín Asenjo has been responsible for the magnetic force microscopy images, Rafael Perez for magnetoptic Kerr effect and sensing applications, and Oksana Chubikarov-Fesenko responsible for the micromagnetic simulation. And with this, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Vázquez. It was really very illustrative. Sorry for the technical deficiencies, but okay, we managed to do it somehow. Έχουμε ώρα για κάποιες ερωτήσεις, αν θέλετε, το κοινό εδώ με το μικρόφωνο ή μέσω Zoom έχουμε κάποιους και από το Zoom. Αν κάποιος θέλει να ρωτήσει κάτι, απλά θα σου φέρουν το μικρόφωνο και ρωτάς. Okay.
Ναι. Thank you for your lecture today. It was really nice. I have two questions. One in the for the first half of your speech, and it was illustrated that some of the wires, magnetic wires, were glass coated.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of the glass coating?
Yeah. The purpose of the glass coating is to isolate the external shell is Pyrex, so it's insulating.
It's for temperature isolation?
No, so it is to isolate the metallic core, the magnetic core, from the electrical point of view, from corrosion also. But in addition, the presence of this Pyrex coating introduces very strong mechanical stresses during the fabrication process. So these mechanical stresses are in the origin of the magnetic response of these microwires. So actually the effect of this glass coating, Pyrex coating, is to tailor the magnetic response of the internal core.
Meaning to strengthen the structure so it doesn't.
Well, no, to increase the mechanical stress. Nice. So the origin of this large axial domain is because we have a very strong axial stresses.
And from the second part, it's you mentioned in your lecture an MRI use with the nanosegments. It was.
Yes.
Is it better in the normal contrast? And if yes, how?
Actually, the expert people say that it is very interesting. It is comparable but unfortunately, I am not an expert in this magnetic resonance imaging. So I know they have considered that is good, very good. Well, I don't know exactly. We published that in a few years ago. If you are interested, I can give you the reference. But unfortunately, we prepare the wires, we characterize magnetically, but I don't know very much about this resonance imaging. So magnetic resonance typically has been, now is not so popular, say nuclear magnetic resonance, but it's
interested in the medical use of
yes. Okay. Yes.
Interesting. You can do.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other question or comment?
Yeah.
Βαγγέλης εκεί. Ιωάννα, θα πας λίγο τέρμα πάνω στη στιγμή.
So you have shown us very nice how you make your nanowires at the beginning with this video. I'm wondering, how do you make the multi-layers?
The multi-layers. So nanowire have it. Okay. I summarize very much the process of filling the poles with magnetic elements. So during the growth of the nanowires, so you have to use a particular acid, electrolytical bath. So for that, you make a deposition of some length of a particular component, and then you remove you put a different electrolytical bath, you grow the next, and so on. So in fact, I can say that very easily, but it requires particular knowledge because it's not so easy to. Also, the same with the modulations in diameter. But yeah, it is a matter of an electrochemical procedure, the parameters of the electrochemical deposition. Somewhere.
Again, from me, thank you for the amazing presentation. I just wanted to ask on the second part, you talked about vortexes at some point.
Sorry, I cannot hear you very well.
Okay. On the second part, you
yes.
talked about vortexes at some point.
Yes.
Yes, and I wanted to ask, as a phenomenon, is this something beneficial or does it pose us trouble?
Well, as I mentioned at the very beginning, the objective of these curved nanostructures is to see which is the effect, the consequence of having curvilinear nanostructures. And these vortices are influenced by the cylindrical geometry. You see, this vortex has a cylindrical, in the axis you have a axial magnetization, but as you get out of the axis, you get circumferential magnetization. So our objective is to study which is the role played by the curvature. And these vortices are influenced, are promoted by the cylindrical geometry.
I get why they're made. I just don't understand, is this something we want or is this something that happens and we don't want?
No, of course it happens, but we are looking for that.
Thank you. Can I ask something? You mentioned that in the wall of the first domain, the single domain wall, the magnetization, I think, stops.
I cannot hear you.
Okay. You mentioned in the single domain wall that the magnetization, I think, stops. And there are some applications we can use by this phenomenon. Can you say which applications these are?
But they are related. Well, this is the more simple case dealing with one domain wall. In fact, we can, in addition, if we have an additional local coil, we can have two domain walls moving in opposite directions, one from one end, another from the other one, and we get an annihilation. And we get a very large peak just in the position of this, where the wall is annihilating. Or even we can work with 3 or 4, we have worked only up to 4 domain walls moving simultaneously. So you can control very locally the presence of domain walls, annihilating domain walls with very sharp peaks. And this is for position sensors. For position sensor, you can control very locally where you have these maximum peaks, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Έχουμε καμιά ερώτηση ακόμα, παρατήρηση? Ωραία.
Hello. I want to question you mentioned about killing cancer cells with
nanowires. Yeah.
I was wondering if that is in use or still in process.
Well, this is so. I am not expert in killing cells, but these oncological cells, they attract the nanowire, and then imagine that you have if you are a cell and you have a nanowire inside, and if you apply a low frequency magnetic field, so this nanowire is rotating in your body. So the cell is killed not by hyperthermia, but by friction. So it's a different mechanism. Most of the people, I would say, are working in hyperthermia with nanoparticles. But in that case, because of the preferential direction of the nanowire, you can induce a different model to kill these cells.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we can stop here. Let's thank the speaker again.
Thank you very much.
Και στην αφίσα υπάρχει το email του, αν κάποιος από εσάς θέλει να επικοινωνήσει μαζί του για κάτι παραπάνω. I say that in the poster you have your email, so if somebody wants some extra information for you. Okay, thank you very much once again.